All right, folks, here we go on this beautiful Thursday. Good afternoon, one and all. We're going to begin in just a moment, and we're also going to feature our legal expert, attorney Stephanie Murphy, is going to be joining us. So we do have, obviously, the big story continues to be the trans shooter in Minneapolis, that crazy situation. But we're going to touch on some of the legal stories that are happening on this Thursday. So let me just check audio and sound, which I think should be fine. All right, Gian says audio is good. And we're on a roll on that because the audio always seems to be good. Folks, another pleasant day. Now we're going to be active.
All right, Gian says audio is
Yes, we're going to be active over Labor Day weekend as far as Road Patrol Live. So there's that to look forward to. And let's see. Let's see. Who is that? Oh, okay. There's that. Okay. Yep. Okay. Everything seems good. Let me just check that. And we should be good to go. Okay. Yep. Okay. And there's that. Look at that. Okay. Okay. We're going to be beginning. Let's see. I think we are just 4 minutes out. There's Janet Dwyer. Hi there, Janet. There's Debbie. Good afternoon, one and all. There's Robin. How the AG today? I don't know what that means. Do I call myself the AG? I don't know what that means. There's Bruce. Yes. We were active. Folks, this is good Road Patrol Live weather, which will be out. It was a bad accident in Warwick this morning. My goodness. Posted the photos, so we're going to have to find out some more details on that. But very, very frightening. I don't know exactly what caused it. It's very odd when you see one vehicle on top of the other. I did post it on both our Facebook page and Instagram page. So let's see. Visiting hours, Judge Caprio, obviously in the news, be laid to rest. But that Minneapolis, now 3 dead Minneapolis, 17 hurt. So enjoyed speaking with Dan McGowan earlier. Wow. And the story out of Minneapolis, it's just so frightening because of the shooter was then saying that he brainwashed himself, and one of the reasons for the shooting was he was so upset that they had transitioned apparently to a female. So that would never stop the locals, that's for sure. All right. There's Brenda. Good afternoon. There's Chuck. I miss going to Miss Charlie's in Jamestown. The dining scene has declined. Folks, just checking weather forecasts. It should be terrific over the next couple of days. I believe all dry. Yes. Do I see any? There's a chance of rain tomorrow, but Saturday sunny, Sunday sunny, Labor Day cloudy. Next chance of rain will be next Friday. So good weather, and we hope to take advantage of it. All right, we're going to be starting in just 1 minute. Hi there, Catherine. Yes, I agree, Catherine. There's Eric. Yep. Oh, Andrea Lemire. Oh, okay. I still don't understand that. I admit, folks, the Assistant Attorney General, I don't know. She's on paid leave for the next 6 months. And I believe family she married into is pretty well off. So I wouldn't be worrying about that one, Robin. You know what? No offense. You know what? Whatever worry you have going on, I wouldn't worry about her. How's the G today? I don't know. All right, we're going to begin. Folks, at 1:06, good afternoon. Again, bright and sunny on this Thursday, August 28th. We're going to speak with attorney Stephanie Murphy in just a moment with some of the top legal stories of the week. But folks, I want to use, suddenly you're in need of some legal advice or a family member. And I hear from family members, coworkers, concerned spouses, aunt and uncle, brother, sister. I received an email, the person that sits next to him at work got into some trouble. What should they do? Don't guess. Don't Google it. Don't just sit around. Don't ask your brother-in-law or your next door neighbor. No, call Marin, Barrett, and Murphy, criminal defense attorneys. 50 years combined Rhode Island criminal defense experience. Your fight becomes their fight. And what I try to tell people is, why not call and find out if you do have a legal situation or something to be concerned about or what to do. 401-228-8271, Marin, Barrett, and Murphy. And as we talk about, folks, remember, as much as, obviously we support law enforcement and back the blue and work quite a bit with police, but even the police, they are well aware that people, you do have rights. People are entitled to their rights. Now, that gunman in Rehoboth, the boyfriend, think of that. Allegedly, the suspect, well, that's what he's accused of, that he took the life of the girlfriend, Kylie, and then buried her on his property. He went to the police station and sat down with state police detectives without an attorney. Now, if he had said, I will sit down with you, but I want to have an attorney with me, what do you think they're going to say? So, folks, you have that right. So contact them, Marin, Barrett, and Murphy, 401-228-8271. And let's bring her on right now, folks. It is our legal expert, and it is Stephanie Murphy. Good afternoon, Stephanie.
Good afternoon, John.
Stephanie, I'd like to start off. It looks like it's the final period, just so people understand the legal text. And this has to do with the individual, worked for the Attorney General's office, still does, 6-month paid leave. But people have been asking, what does it mean that basically she pled no contest on the trespassing charge?
Yeah, so no contest is very similar, and it is the same as a guilty plea. Basically, what you're admitting to is that the state or the town could prove the charges against you and that you're not really fighting the charges. So she agreed. She entered into nolo plea. And the 6-month filing means that the case gets set aside for 6 months. If she stays out of trouble, then the case is dismissed and sealed off her record so that there's nothing on her record afterwards.
And people should need to understand, pleading the no contest. This, I mean, you live this every day. This is something that happens quite frequently with a lot of these types of cases.
Yeah, in Rhode Island, most of the time it's always a NOLO plea. It's very rare in Rhode Island that you have something called an Alfred plea where there's no admission of a wrongdoing. So it's either NOLO or guilty. On some serious charges, some judges require a guilty plea. But typically, I would say 99% of the time that case is resolved with a plea, it is from a NOLO plea.
Now, this other headline, I've received some emails of people that are concerned about privacy rights. Providence police are tapping into camera networks citywide to combat crime. Stephanie, if someone is traveling in the city of Providence, based on what we know, what rights of privacy should people expect that they essentially give up when they are going to be driving in a city that then is using these types of techniques?
Well, I think the expectation of privacy in the last couple decades, especially this decade, has really gone down. People realize that there's private cameras everywhere, that people have cell phones. So the expectation of privacy has really, really changed, especially in the last 15 years. But now with Providence and what the police are doing, I think it's a great way for police officers to get informed and kind of know where people are and know what's going on. But at the same time, as a criminal defense attorney, I have a lot of concerns. Am I, as a defense attorney, going to have access to show my client wasn't there? Am I going to have access to all these cameras to prove my client didn't do it? It's great that it can be used to catch people, but do I have the same access, or can they show me the footage at that time so I can show you my client wasn't there and that my client was actually across town? Are they going to provide me with that footage? Is it recorded? How long is it kept? So as a defense attorney, I have, a bunch of concerns, but I also think it could be helpful if I got access to it also in a case.
I've received email from people and they're wondering, these are just general questions. If they're riding in Providence, is there some way that their cell phone is being tracked, meaning that the cell phone bounces off somewhere, so now they have them? Some people are concerned this actually, I'm unaware of this, but this could tap into their text messages, or does this mean that the police could listen to conversations
Yeah,
inside
that
their
would all,
vehicles?
yeah, I think that would all have to be done through search warrants and stuff like that. But in terms of tapping off of towers and knowing locations with a search warrant of your cell phone company, they can definitely get the location of where you were when you sent a text and stuff like that. I haven't received or have knowledge that what Providence is doing has that access, right now with cell phones, but it's definitely a concern. Anytime you have a cell phone, if anybody gets a subpoena, the police department, they can absolutely look to see where you were when you were using it and everything like that.
Is this just finally, is this more about the license plates where they are tracking the flock cameras? So then if they get a plate and then it bumps off, or they call it, they got a hit somewhere, wherever it may be, that they could in real time track where that vehicle may be within the city?
I think that's one of the reasons, but the other part that I read in the articles and the news stories is that they can, if it's a chase or they're looking for somebody maybe on foot, they have access with permission of the business, or residential owners have access to their personal cameras to see, if that person's on their camera, instantaneous access that's being given by a business owner or a private citizen, to track people, to look at people, to conduct surveillance.
One final question on this. What about a business owner? I did hear from a business owner. He has cameras, and he was wondering, what if when the police come to see him, if he won't give them access to what's ever caught on his cameras?
Well, he absolutely has a right to not give them access, but whether or not, they get a subpoena and, argue to a judge and stuff like that, a subpoena should be granted, a search warrant, stuff like that. There's definitely ways around that. But if somebody does not give permission, it can definitely stop the police in their tracks, and they would have to try to, go a different route.
This next story, man charged after police chase ends in Route 6 crash. Stephanie, again, what should, a lot of times people don't recognize that one of the reasons that I've learned, or several reasons, that someone that could be an outstanding warrant, they could be under the influence, they may have something, drugs in the car, or maybe they're intoxicated, whatever. But what advice do you give to people where it sounds like a lot of these chases, there's a motivation, or there's a reason why they're not stopping, but it never seems to end well?
No, it doesn't. Typically ends up with more arrests, such as eluding, obstruction, or, someone getting hurt, including the person running or, a private citizen minding their own business. So never a good idea to add to the charges or anything like that. But when I read in this case, it doesn't seem like there was an outstanding warrant or anything like that. And he wasn't charged with a DUI. So I was a little surprised, that this typically you're right, John. There's a reason why people are worried about something. So maybe there was a reason and we just don't know about it. But definitely, it's never a good idea to give the police more charges on you.
And there has been, some police have told me when they first started, the order kind of was you chase. If there's a police chase, you go until you run out of gas. They don't do that anymore. Many times when we're out, police, they signal that they're breaking off the chase. So I just wonder if some people are under the impression of if they start to get chased, that eventually the police are going to give up.
No, you're right. The police have definitely changed their protocols and what they do, definitely for the safety of the public and everything like that. Arresting a person on a warrant that they know is not as important as keeping the public safe. But yeah, I do think people do recognize that the police aren't going to go out and chase someone like they used to and stuff like that. I mean, there's definitely different circumstances where, if someone's, at harm's way or something like that, the police would take a more aggressive approach. But definitely has changed over the years and is much more, if we can get them, we can get them, but we're not going to endanger the public in trying to get somebody.
This next story, and again, if you feel free to give advice on this, but 2 face drug charges after a traffic stop in Lincoln. What would you advise someone? Because I did get email and people saying, hey, listen, if I'm not going the speed limit, the police do not, if I'm following the speed limit, the police have no right to search my car. That's my private property. But how would you advise in this a situation similar to this?
I mean, they're right. They don't have a right to search their private car or, the person and stuff like that, unless the police, in their personal opinion, believe that they do have probable cause, and reasonable suspicion. So in a circumstances like this, you don't want your car searched. You really have to limit any suspicion that the police may have. But police officers are trained and pretty good at writing the reports, different trigger words that would allow them to search and have that search kind of upheld, such as, nervousness, throwing something under the back seat, throwing something out the window. That kind of gives the police officers enough momentum to go and search. But you always have to face the fact that a defense attorney is most likely going to file a motion to suppress that search. So not only do the police have to articulate the reasons why they did the search, but also if body cam footage and other things that we have now, it has to show that too. The police officer can't just say, oh, he was nervous and jumping around in the car and not have it on video if the video shows the car. So definitely, if the search does happen, we can definitely file a motion to suppress. But my advice is, be polite to the officer, answer the questions, and don't give the police officer a reason to think that there's anything going on that shouldn't be going on.
Stephanie, I don't think people realize, by and large, you tell me with some of the clients you have, but in Rhode Island, just getting caught with illegal substance, someone's riding along, police stop them, they have some cocaine on them or whatever. It's my understanding, a lot of the police that I talk to, unless the person's distributing it or selling it, they're not arresting people for that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the police officers definitely can use some discretion in charging and, everything like that. And I think that's kind of based on, the history, any prior interactions, criminal record, what they admit to, what they say, and stuff like that. If your, interaction with the police is honest and forthcoming, that might be a different result than if you're not. So it really kind of depends on what the crime is, what the charge is. But what I do want to point out in terms of searches is sometimes it could be like a non-arrestable offense, such as, driving on a suspended license or, not having the proper registration. At that point, it ends up being a search because you're no longer able to drive the car and the police are going to tow your car. And once the car gets towed, they do a search for an inventory. So a lot of times people are, driving on a suspended license, they're not able to drive home. They're not under arrest for it, but the car's getting towed because they can't drive it. And then they'll do the inventory search. And that is how, some, drugs are found, weapons are found, stuff like that. So just make people aware that a search can be done under, an inventory search.
Do people do that sometimes, Stephanie? They throw something out of the vehicle thinking then they could just claim, no, I don't have anything in here. That's not mine.
Yep, absolutely. I think it happens a lot more than we think, and I'm sure the police officers you ride with can vouch for that. But I mean, police officers absolutely know what to look for when, they turn on their lights or even when they're following a car. I'll see in all the police reports, the police officer when they're following with their lights, shining from their headlights, they see people, jumping in the back seat, reaching down, hiding their heads. That's kind of what you see a lot in the police reports, and I'm sure you've seen it on the road too.
Folks, now it's time for Murphy's Law. This is a story that Stephanie has found. What do you have for us this week, Stephanie Murphy?
It's kind of the sad story from Myrtle Beach with that teenager who was shot and killed. I just bring it up in terms of, there's a lot of people charged in this, in the murder of this teenage boy. The conspiracy charges that we've talked about a lot on the show. This is a perfect example of, sending a text or picking somebody up. You can get charged with some serious crimes. And, this innocent teenager, is no longer with us because of actions that, a bunch of different people took. Some actions are worse than others, of course, but all these kids are getting charged, and some of them are getting charged as adults and stuff like that.
Oh.
And it's just a good reminder of you have to be careful of who you associate with, what you know, and what you do. Even though you can't control what other people do, if you're part of it, you're part of it, and you're facing some very serious consequences. And I think sometimes that just doesn't get realized.
I think in that story, I'm not sure. I think at least 9 are being charged, maybe even.
At least, yeah. I don't know
Yeah.
if they're investigating still, but I mean, there's text messages, there's phone calls, there's different houses, there's different video surveillance. I mean, I don't know if they're going to charge every single person, but they've charged a lot of people so far. And it's just a good reminder. You have to be careful what you say, what you do, especially in this day and age. There's, tracing of everything you do and where you are.
Folks, again, it is attorney Stephanie Murphy. Stephanie, excellent job as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Sean. Bye.
All right, folks, there it is, attorney Stephanie Murphy. Now, remember, as I've stated, as much as obviously we ride with the police, support the police, work with the police, however, there are instances where you need an attorney. 401-228-8271. This portion of our program, how about some fresh vegetable this weekend? You can have them. PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center. They have fresh summer corn. They also have fresh peaches and vegetables. 3688 Quaker Lane in North Kingstown. PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center. Now remember, they're a full-scale nursery. The fall is a great time to do planting. PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center. They're open 7 days a week, right off of Route 4 as you're coming back from the beaches. Stop in and see them. Also, don't forget about DePietro.com, brought to you by the Cohasset Inn, 226 Cohasset Avenue, West Warwick. They have a great menu. I mean, they're always improving, changing the menu, improving the menu. Stop into the Cohasset Inn. Now, I'm going to pop in over the course of the weekend. Their chef specials right now, whether it's the pierogi or pork chop or surf and turf, or they have clam cakes and chowder or steamers or tuna, tequila, lime chicken. That's just on the chef specials. Stop in and see them at the Cohasset Inn. Well, folks, locally, and again, good afternoon. Still a lot of fallout with what happened with the shooter. And it seems to be, I don't want to go in too much of a rabbit hole. There's been a lot of coverage on this. There's something odd, though, I think we could say about Minneapolis and Minnesota. You have that mayor yesterday, screaming about that people were wasting their time praying. I didn't understand that. I always thought the governor I just think he's odd. Governor Walz, he's the one, he ran on the ticket with Harris, and he had that odd remark in a debate where he said something about he's friends with a school shooter or something. And as I said yesterday, that's the first thing I thought of when I heard about this. But as I've also mentioned, organized religion is under attack. And you can see where in the media, CNN was arguing about the pronouns of the shooter. So he was born Robert, and then he's transitioning to Robin. And then according to the manifest of this Minneapolis shooter, this is a young person who was incredibly unhappy, did not plan on surviving this attack, so does the attack and then takes their own life. And within the media, on CNN and some other places, they're all making sure that they're using the right pronouns. So now I recognize that it is difficult for individuals and specifically families that are dealing with children. And this has become kind of a big deal, I'd say like the last 10 years. And someone that I like that I watch sometimes is Bill Maher. Not all the time, but he's talked about how he went to some dinner party in Los Angeles and three couples at the table all had children that were transitioning from, one gender to another, whether it was they had a son who was going to transition into be a girl, or they had a daughter who was transitioning to be a boy. And I remember at the time he said, all right, so this is Los Angeles, but would this be going on in Ohio? And the answer was no. And talked about how the danger, and locally, by the way, happy birthday to Nicole Solis, who is a real warrior and is a hero and has just been in this incredible battle, the way she was under attack by organized labor, the teachers unions. And she's pointed out how in Rhode Island, how, this encouraging, it's so confusing to children where teachers are encouraging them to explore. We're not talking about picking up a hobby. We're not, teacher unions. We're not talking about encouraging them to try a new sport, or maybe why not try, join the theater club, or why don't you join a new organization at school, whatever that may be. But when you start having children and they're transitioning and being encouraged, transitioning to switch gender, and this is permanent results that they are stuck with. Irreversible is what it is. And keeping the parents in the dark. It's just such, how did it ever get to that? And what you need to understand is our area of the country, Rhode Island and Massachusetts, are some of the leaders in it where it's encouraged. And you have elected officials doing it. I agree and support those who have said that is something that should be reserved until someone turns 18 years old. At least then they're an adult. But in the Rhode Island schools, the teachers unions encouraging this, there's just, I think there's something drastically wrong. They don't know what the result is going to be. And the whole school shooting and who this individual was, this is someone, but listen, first and foremost, this is someone that should not have had access to weapons. But there should be the notion that someone wants to do that and change their gender. I just think it should be examined a little bit more. There could be a lot more going on. And there have been other studies done and examples of the person goes through it and does it at a young age. And then they're incredibly unhappy. They think, I thought I was unhappy as a boy. Now I'm really unhappy as a girl, or vice versa. But it's frightening when you have elected officials in Rhode Island, right? Gabe Amo, Congressman Amo, Seth Magaziner, the State House, the Democrat Party, the Progressive Women's Caucus, encouraging this. I'm telling you, I don't understand in this day and age, and there's so many of them, we're surrounded by them, but if you are a registered Democrat, I don't understand how someone, these are the leaders you're talking about. It's a complete disaster is what it is. Folks, this portion of our program is brought to you by Propane Plus. Now remember, propane, this is energy for everyone. This is the direction that Rhode Island should be going. which is Propane Plus. And propane is renewable and it's safe and it's energy for everyone. Propane Plus, and it's your opportunity to go with the leader. I'll tell you, the Johnson family, they have been involved in the propane business, whether it's Rhode Island or Massachusetts. You can depend on Propane Plus. 401-885-4209, or in Massachusetts, 508-252-3359. If you log on at propaneplus.com, you see different options. I'm looking for residential or commercial, heating or cooling, and boom, jump right into action. They're available 24/7. You can depend on Propane Plus. I also want to remind you, you want to find out, many people do, about options for your children or grandchildren as far as before and after school programs or preschool programs. Where you want to take them, I believe, and explore is Kids Club on the Pike. Kids Club on the Pike, where it is safe, there's no radical agenda. They're right on the Cranston-Johnston line, and that is perfect for birthday party venue, before and after school care, preschool. Kids Club on the Pike. They're right off of 295 on the Cranston-Johnston line on Plainfield Pike. You can call them 401-443-5336. It's Kids Club on the Pike. Remember, perfect venue for like a birthday party or a youth gathering, but also before and after school care in preschool. It's Kids Club on the Pike. 401-443-5336. Well, the obviously with the Labor Day weekend is coming up, and then after Labor Day is when I believe we're going to start to have some more people, I would hope, are going to start to announce that they're going to be running for office. And I want to remind people that as of right now, that Rhode Island Governor Dan McKee, he is the only truly viable. I'm not talking about some of the fringe people that just run, but the question is who's going to run to take over, because the election is next November. And so I come back to the Democrat Party. And right now, again, this was the leader. This was the chair of the Democrat Women's Progressive Caucus in Rhode Island, decided to elect the Reverend Donnie Anderson as their chairperson. And folks, what you have to understand is if you are, Governor McKee and Matos and Seth Magaziner and Sheldon Whitehouse, when does this end? When does it end? How are people part of that party? How do people say, yeah, no, I'm a progressive Democrat, and this is the chair of the Progressive Women's Caucus? They elected a transgender to be their first and their chairperson. Like, where is all of this leading? And do you also notice that the failed policies right now of the state, do you realize Rhode Island and Massachusetts, folks, the states are not thriving? People that want to start businesses, they're not coming here. People that are looking to move ahead, there are states that are thriving. Texas is thriving. Now, that's the shooter we're showing right now from Minneapolis. And there is obviously, this is an individual that has serious problems, but then the more that they dive into it, as the New York Post said, demonic transgender. Why won't, and the local media won't call the person a transgender? Like, why is that so important? And you notice our local elected officials, McKee, Magaziner, Amo, Whitehouse, Matos, none of them will call out, and none of our local media will mention that maybe this was someone who, by saying that they were just unhappy with their gender, that it was hiding something much deeper. I don't hear that explored in any way. And I'm saying it should be explored because it becomes a mask. When you accept that someone says, no, now I'm going to be happy. Now, this is who I am. And the local media, as I said, they just embrace it and put the person up. Do you realize this was for years was the Reverend Donald Anderson, married, I believe 2 children. And then suddenly, I think he turned 70. Hair grows long, maybe a weave, dresses at a name change. And applauded in Democrat circles. Where is all this leading? I don't understand. Nowhere healthy. It doesn't have to be that way. Massachusetts has decided to just go off the rails. But Rhode Island shouldn't have to follow Mass. I say you have Connecticut, Mass, and Rhode Island. Rhode Island should, if Rhode Island wants to mirror a state, it should mirror New Hampshire, not Mass and Connecticut, not those 2 states. What is the benefit of just being the same as Mass and Connecticut instead of being different? Why not be different? If you're going to follow a state in New England, New Hampshire doesn't have the types of problems that these other states have. And New Hampshire doesn't have police forces. They're not working, with ICE. Folks, this portion of our program is brought to you by ServPro of Providence. So remember, disaster can strike at any time on 941-5500. God bless me. 401-941-5500. ServPro, whether it is a fire. And if you have fire, then you have smoke damage, and then you have water damage, or maybe a pipe burst. ServPro of Providence, from water damage to fire to smoke to mold, fast, thorough, professional, and they're available 24/7. Remember, when disaster strikes, ServPro of Providence is there. Whether it's 3 in the morning on a Sunday, 401-941-5500. They bring the latest technology, certified expertise, get your property back to normal and fast. Restoration, reliability, results. ServPro Providence, and they're ready 24/7 with the experience and technology to restore your property fast, like it never happened. 401-941-5500. Now, where Rhode Island is right now, folks, this whole situation with wind, and it was interesting to hear Dan McGowan of the Boston Globe. We talked to him last hour. Thank you, Debbie. We talked to him last hour, and it is, you hear about all these other businesses that are coming in, and what is going to happen if the plug is pulled? It's not an effective, efficient form of energy. But just getting back to transitioning. Very, very difficult, Cindy. And on top of that, I want to, not only would it be difficult, but think of an unhappy 13-year-old, and then you have someone out there who is the leader of the Women's Progressive Caucus saying you have an unhappy 12 or 13-year-old. A lot of times that could be normal. That could be teen angst. That could just be part of, new friend group. Their body is changing. You have, young boys. They're not as tall as they'd like to be. You have young girls that maybe they're not developing like some of their peers, or they're not popular, or they, whatever it may be. They're just having an awkward stage of puberty. But then you have a full party, the Progressive Democrat Party in Rhode Island, encouraging them. Well, have you ever thought, I think can you imagine saying to a really unhappy 13-year-old, boy or girl, I think to a boy, you'd really be happy as a female, or to a girl. You know what your problem is? You want to be happy, you should become a boy. Do you understand this is irreversible damage that is being done to their bodies and doing it behind the backs of the parents? It just brings on a whole host of different problems. So, and then what happens, last fall, there was a horrible situation where a 14-year-old girl, I say last fall, maybe it wasn't. I think it was some time ago, but a 14-year-old girl in Providence took her own life in her closet at home. Parents had to find her. 14, left a note at happy. It's just such a delicate age. And when you have a political party trying to cash in on that, it's just, there's something deeply wrong about that. So in order for people to thank you, it is sad. But what's sad is when you have parents or really parents in the dark, and then politicians that just push this agenda. It's really, really sad that this happens. To be encouraging it, and what would be the harm with waiting until they turn 18 years old? Why does that have to be done with a 13 and 14-year-old or 15-year-old? But this is becoming the thing. And then you have these kids that they're not popular in school. And there was a teenager, and the mother was doing TikToks where she was helping the daughter. I don't remember if it was the daughter or the son, but transition. And the way she spoke about it. And, the child was then even confused and upset and emotional and encouraging it. And I don't understand. Yes, think of that, Anna, with the sneakers. That's true. But folks, look at the person I'm showing is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. They just go along with it. They absolutely just kind of go along with the notion that somehow, it's up to the child to pick the gender. And who are we to tell a young child what their gender is? Much I remember the story in the Boston Globe that this was in Cambridge, where number one, they talked about how a lot of pregnant mothers, when people would ask them, they'd see that they're expecting and say, oh, do you know if you're having a boy or a girl? And they would say, well, we're going to let the child decide. And then at some of the playgrounds in Cambridge, Massachusetts, there was a surge where you'd see young children in gray clothing. And when, people, whatever, just trying to be nice or polite, or another parent, or at the playground, sometimes another child, and they act as though it's an infringement if you say, is that a little boy or a little girl? And these parents in Cambridge, and there are parents like this also on the east side of Providence, saying, well, we're going to let them decide. Who are we to decide? Again, I'm not a medical doctor, but I'm pretty sure that at birth you can kind of tell what the gender is. But to treat it as we just want to see how they're going to grow into it. This is the same crowd that refuses to acknowledge that boys are a little more rambunctious traditionally than girls, that sometimes young girls can play quietly and play with dolls and do things like that. And then boys are a little more rough and tumble and want to wrestle or play with a ball or something like that. And they want to treat it. Nope, there's no difference. Folks, that is the Rhode Island Democrat Party. That's what people have to come to grips with. Yep. And it's encouraged. And it's encouraged at the highest levels of the teachers union. No one can convince me they're not on board with it. They're absolutely on board with it. And think where Rhode Island is right now with that Val Lawson. Val Lawson is, the new Senate president that is the head of the teachers union. It's complete insanity with that. That is not something that should be taught in the schools. Folks, this portion of our program is brought to you by J. Perry Paving. Now remember, call them today. They are licensed and insured. What a difference it's going to make for your property. J. Perry Paving. Free estimate, any project. J. Perry Paving. 401, you see the number on your screen, 732-1730. 401-732-1730. How much would it be to have your driveway paved? Well, call them and find out. Or on top of that, they have a great package for veterans. You know what's better than one veteran getting their driveway paved? Two. I've gone and filmed J. Perry Paving. They've been on a job. They do 3 driveways on a street or a cul-de-sac. 401-732-1730. If your dad is a veteran or your mom or your grandmother or grandfather, J. Perry Paving. 401-732-1730. Free estimate, any project. High quality, fair pricing, exceptional service. It's J. Perry Paving. Well, folks, good afternoon. And admittedly, I get it that it can be challenging for parents. I totally understand that. And, I am aware of some parents that are going through this with their children. But where I disagree is those that somehow feel that it's a place for that it should be in the classroom and that teachers should be involved and that it should be kept from the parents, that this should be a private decision between a young child and a teacher at the school, which basically uses them as almost like a social experiment. Folks, I believe we need a call to arms to end this reign that we have right now of McKee and Matos and their progressive ideals. When you have Matos saying, well, Rhode Island citizens, they're not citizens. This comes back to the war that they have on ICE. And I'll say this about Governor McKee. Listen, I don't know. I hear from people he was a pretty good mayor of Cumberland. And I've heard from people that when he was lieutenant governor, he was, in an open ear, he would try to help. People would run into a brick wall with Gina. McKee would step up. But if anyone thinks, do you understand, he's looking for 4 more years as governor. What's going on with the bridge? What's going on with offshore wind? The roads are a wreck. They've chased away all the private business. Folks, who is going to be the leader to step up in the state? I just don't know. Children need guidance, and not from an adult that has them from September to June. And all being done behind the backs, but it's all part of the Democrat Party. And the fact that, as I mentioned, and there are people that try to then make arguments. Their argument is that they just don't like Trump. And they don't like the president. And, they go down that whole rabbit hole. But if you look around, there are states right now that are actually thriving and doing. But in those states, you don't have someone leading the state or the party the way you have, with what's going on right now within the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party, where is the leadership? I just don't see it. I'll tell you, it's not coming from that guy. It's not coming from Governor Magritte and Matos. They're both, do you understand? They're both running for re-election. 4 more years. If he is re-elected next fall of 26, Governor McGreed, do you understand? He gets inauguration is January of 27, and then he's in. The next election would be November of 30th. He would leave office in December of 2030. What is going to be left? Well, there are term limits, but he gets another term, and the other one, because he got a full term. We certainly need term limits at the State House. That's part of it. But more people need to get involved in the process. This is there's not enough people speaking out on behalf of the children. The problem is the teachers' unions run the state, and the teachers' unions encourage. Keep in mind, the teachers' union in Rhode Island, they didn't even want it against the law that teachers could date students so that it would be a crime. They didn't want that. And they're very powerful about it. And the teachers, let's face it, the public schools right now, the public school formula is broken. But what you have are people that are just puppets to the teachers union. Folks, this portion of our program brought to you by Arch Design Builders. Remember, they specialize in residential design. Call Ed and Roxanne today at 401-207-4124. 401-207-4124. Arch Design Builders. Now, maybe are you listening or watching on this Thursday? Maybe it's time to upgrade that kitchen or the bathroom, or maybe you have an unfinished basement, or maybe like a deck or a special project. Arch, A-R-C-H, Arch Design Builders. They do fantastic work, high-end, custom-build, customer service, 5-star builder skill set, meticulous. Set up that free meeting. Let's dream. Let's look at what the space is. Let's look at what it could become. 401-218-9707 for Arch Design Builders. Well, folks, again, good afternoon. It is, someone like Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. So term limits, we should have term limits in the Senate and for Congress. But we also need Whitehouse right now. Senator Whitehouse, you're talking about someone that, to me, he is tragically, I mean, people have run against him. But he, in essence, has almost just, he is like unbeatable at this point because of they amass, such a campaign war chest. But one thing about Whitehouse, he's certainly not serving the people. He is really there. He is just running a war against the judicial system, against the Supreme Court, against this White House, and he's outspoken. And I also want to mention this about Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, is he gets a free pass from our local media. Show me anything negative written about him. You won't find it. No, he gets a complete free pass. I mean, they all really do. That press conference about the wind early this week, that was an embarrassment. That was a joke. And Sabatoni screaming, and I mean, their idea of they stand up and just keep insulting President Trump. And right now, in Rhode Island, there's more people becoming Republicans than Democrats. There's far more people that are becoming independent. But we need wholesale change. People need to realize these people, they're not delivering anything. And him spouting off Sheldon Whitehouse, these are union jobs, as if that's something special. It's all government. These are all organized labor, private sector. How did this arrangement come this way? Their plan was for us to have this very expensive form of energy in the form of wind energy, which needs state subsidies, government subsidies. That's, that wind expert that we had on the other day. Yes, that's right, Maria. Line the pockets. Him and the wife. When does the corruption end? We need to get these people out of here. their policies are not working in other states. They're on board with, look at the governor of California, Newsom, has destroyed California. Businesses are leaving, people are leaving. It's impossible to run a business. It's impossible to run a small business. They keep raising the minimum wage. Do you understand? The Rhode Island Democrats, they just mimic what they're seeing in some of these larger blue states. And they want to bring it to Rhode Island, whether it's they see things in Mass, or they see things in Connecticut, or they see things in Illinois, or they see things in California. I mean, I used to love going to Los Angeles. I've been to Los Angeles, I mean, over 15 times. And so you can't. You go out there now, it's just completely overrun by illegals and homelessness, and they're so business unfriendly. And in White House, and they admire someone like a Gavin Newsom, who is declaring war on the Trump administration with his failed policies. Folks, this portion of the program is brought to you by Quality Asphalt Seal Coating. Listen, if you want to improve your home, your property, here's something you can do. Have them epoxy your garage or patio or decorative concrete flooring. Call Corey for a free estimate, 401-283-9815. Quality Asphalt Seal Coating. Tell them you want to get your garage epoxied. Free estimate makes a huge difference when your garage suddenly, like, oh my God, this is fantastic. Forget about having an old dusty garage and the floor is dirty and oils. No, get your garage epoxied, or patio or decorative concrete flooring. They also will resurface a tennis court, a basketball court, a pickleball court. Quality Asphalt Seal Coating. Call them, 401-283-9815. Now, the season for seal coating, it's only through the fall. So get your name on the list right now, before then the season ends. And then you have to wait till next spring. Free estimate, 401-283-9815 for Quality Asphalt Seal Coating. What we need, thank you, Debbie. That's right. We need people that are going to step up. We need some people that are going to have the courage to take on. And I'm not saying it's easy. But I think we are at a tipping point. The Trump administration is basically saying, send me some Republican representatives. Seth Magaziner completely just criticizes the administration, won't work with anyone in Congress. Congressman Gabe Amo won't work with anyone in Congress. Senator Whitehouse won't work with any Republican in Congress. And all they do is insult the administration. The Trump administration is saying, send me some people I can work with. Send me some people that will reach across the aisle. Send me some people that are not just puppets of the special interest. And now it's time for the people, the voters, to do that. But we also have to rein in our voting system. And it's very simple. The campaigns have to be removed from our voting. Political campaigns in Rhode Island should have nothing to do with ballots. They shouldn't be collecting ballots. They shouldn't be distributing ballots. And they do. And therefore, we have illegitimate elections. I'm looking at some headlines. J.D. Vance says, I'm ready to be president. Vance worried about NFL Super Bowl wedding. Let's see who emerges in 28. Putin pounds Kyiv. Second biggest bombing of war. Russia threatens march to Paris. I don't know. Something's got to be done. Something absolutely has to be done in that situation, because he's not going to go anywhere. Now, folks, just a reminder. We are going to be very active this weekend. Make sure you follow the best thing to do is go to our website, depetro.com. You have links to our Facebook page. You have links to TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and also X. And remember, if you'd also like to get in touch with me, that's a good way to do it. If you'd like to be one of our sponsors, hey, we have some openings for the fall, reaching huge amounts of people, some record numbers recently. All right, if you're listening to the radio, stay tuned for the 2:00 news. Everyone else, we will see you later tonight on Road Patrol Live. In the meantime, rest in peace, Judge Caprio, and everyone else. Enjoy this Thursday.